BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. And hello, Nedheads. Hello, Black Box Battalion. Today is Friday, another Cooper Friday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? On Fridays, I talk to you guys about D.B. Cooper, the man responsible for the only unsolved skyjacking in U.S. aviation history. And in this episode, I will be continuing with the book Could Forrest Fenn D.B. Cooper, responding to your questions and comments from last week, and of course continuing with the Cooper Profile segment, which is all about the psychological profiling of skyjackers. And you guys know the drill. You can hit the like button if you want, subscribe if you haven't, and drop a comment down below if you have something to say about D.B. Cooper. For larger things, you can send them to me at blackboxonlineradio@aol.com. And I am your host, Box Ned. And there are other segments here on Black Box Online Radio. On Thursdays, I talk about the Black Dahlia. On Wednesdays, about Jack the Ripper. And on Tuesdays, I will be launching a new segment about the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. And of course, most famously, on Mondays about the Zodiac Killer. So I have the opportunity to let you know that today's episode is partially sponsored by Michael Cole, a friend of the show and supporter of Black Box Online Radio. Michael Cole is the author of the Zodiac Revisited trilogy. If the Zodiac case fascinates you, the Zodiac Revisited is a deep dive into the mystery. It is available anywhere you get your true crime books, including Spotify and Amazon.com. And if you enjoy the series, please consider helping out Michael by leaving a 5-star review. Last week on the channel, I did an introductory suspect profile episode for Forrest Fenn, and I was discussing the book Could Forrest Fenn Be D.B. Cooper by Mindy Fauci and Stephanie 30acre, and I would like to continue with this one because I feel that there are some things that I would like to respond to, mostly the questions and comments from you guys, but also to provide a little bit of introductory information about Forrest Fenn that was left out. For example, Forrest Fenn is somebody who organized a famous treasure hunt in the United States. He was an art dealer from New Mexico. How he got his fortune? Well, maybe he skyjacked a plane in 1971 and obtained it that way. Or perhaps he just simply did it by other means. But he took a bronze chest and he filled it with roughly $2 million worth of gold and other valuables. And he hid it somewhere in the Rocky Mountains of the United States. The treasure was reportedly found in 2020, but I would like to just look at some more biographical things about Forrest Fenn that got left out from last week's episode, because of course this is Cooper Friday. So we want to look at the possibilities of Forrest Fenn being D.B. Cooper. Forrest Fenn was born on August 22nd of 1930 to Lily Simpson Fenn and William Marvin Fenn. He shared that his grandmother's side was from the Comanche Indians and that they were very active in the local scenery in Fort Worth, Texas. He went on to write a book called The Thrill of the Chase, which had instructions on how to find his treasure. So if he was born on August 22nd of 1930, he would have been 41 years old at the time of the Cooper skyjacking, which I think is totally reasonable. Forrest grew up in Temple, Texas. He was the middle child with an older brother, Skippy, who was born in 1928, and June, a sister who was born in 1932. So he's a problematic middle child, I kid thee not. No, I mean, that stuff is real. I know this because I am a problematic middle child. And when I do the Cooper Profile segment, which talks about the psychological profiling of skyjackers, that is another one that really does hit home for me when they talk about how Cooper might not have been the oldest in his family, and he might not have been the youngest, because the majority of people who commit skyjackings are usually somewhere in the middle of the birth order. And once again, I'm a middle child, and all of that stuff about problematic middle children is true. Forrest Fenn would then go into the Air Force. Forrest's will for adventure took him to many places as a pilot in the U.S. Air Force. He was stationed stateside in Europe and in Asia, and he flew several different aircrafts, including the Beechcraft T-6 Texan Trainer, the Lockheed T-33 Trainer, the F-86D Sabre, and the F-100C Super Sabre. And, I mean, I just want to ask you guys a challenge question. Because to those people in the vortex who have followed the D.B. Cooper case for quite some time, do you believe that D.B. Cooper was a pilot? Now that's the challenge question. And some people are just absolutely 100%. This guy was a pilot and Vietnam veteran. And somebody like me is not so extreme. I'm more of the mindset that Cooper was ex-military and he had some involvement with aviation. I just leave it under the aviation umbrella or in the aviation sphere. But so many people specifically think that Cooper was a pilot. And what do you think about that? But in terms of being ex-military, Forrest Fenn is also a Vietnam veteran. When the Vietnam War broke out, Forrest was quick to find his way into the fray. Flying the F-100 Super Sabre jets, he flew 328 combat missions against targets of opportunity, including the Ho Chi Minh Trail and also in Laos, Chapon, Laos. He was shot down twice, including his second to last mission, where he explained this ejection, survival, and extraction from the remote jungle in great detail. So we have a Vietnam veteran with an aviation background, 41 years old. Those things are some reasonable points for being D.B. Cooper, or this is within the realm of possibility about what people think D.B. Cooper might actually have been like. But I told you, we're going to do this as a Q&A session in just a second. One of the things that people bring up about Forrest Fenn as a D.B. Cooper suspect is facial similarities to the composite sketches. While he has a few, I mean, maybe if you were to combine the composites in just a certain way, then you might be able to see it. But overall, I don't personally see it. I think that Forrest Fenn actually has very different features to the composite sketches. But I would like to move on to the book now, Could Forrest Fenn Be D.B. Cooper, by Mindy Fauci and Stephanie Thirdyeacre. And I told you last week that this is a book that alternates between stories of personal memoir, like a memoir of personal stories, I should say, and the D.B. Cooper case. And in this week, I would like to look at a different section, maybe two of them actually, so you guys can get the full experience for this book, Could Forrest Fenn Be D.B. Cooper? And this is actually going to go to Chapter 6, and we're going to be talking about the actions and activities in 1980 surrounding the Tina Bar money find. Because in 1980, we had the $6,000 that were found at Tina Bar that were from D.B. Cooper's skyjacking. So let's see what we have here. The Columbia River find of 1980 resulted in a tsunami of new articles, photographs, and shift in the direction of the evolving investigation. Every day, Dad and I explored new articles, added to our scrapbook, and speculated on what had really happened, or read a book together, read about the stuff from the FBI agents who had worked on the case, or an author whose pages fancifully elaborated the scanty facts. And the search was both fun and it was interesting for us. The search had given our lives new purpose and built a unified camaraderie between us. For 4 hours every week while Mom was tending to her soul and Buster and Sue were pursuing the latest romance, doing homework, or just hanging out with friends, Dad and I would huddle over the scrapbook, adding to its contents and sipping hot chocolate or iced tea while we speculated about D.B. Cooper. And as I told you guys, this one really does get into the memoir stuff. Dad would look at me expectantly, my cue to dismiss what I had learned. He would elaborate on my simple explanations, speaking to me not as a child, but as a peer. Those times with him made me feel very grown up. Dad never told me whom he suspected among his past acquaintances, and I knew better than to introduce my conversation with Mom into the mix. And from the section that I read off last week, her father seems like he might know somebody from his Vietnam days who could have been D.B. Cooper, and could this person be Forrest Fenn? Well, he's the subject of the book. Dad never told me whom he suspected among his past acquaintances, and I knew better than to introduce my conversation with Mom into the mix. I figured he would tell me in his own time, and Mom's mild hostility to his past efforts made her opinion off limits. I didn't want to mess up what had become a great way to pass the time and to build a terrific relationship with my father. Dad only occasionally told me about a story here and there from his days in the service, but talked about those times only briefly. All in good time, I thought, all in good time. I'm a firm believer in the old saying that good things come to those who wait. Unfortunately, while waiting for those good things, terrible things would also squeeze their way into the timeline in life. And then, in 1980, Brian Ingram's discovery on the shores of the Columbia River brought home the realization that the focal point of the largest and most expensive search in the country's history had most likely been off by many miles, a significant difference that not only changed the nature of the renewed search activity, but the likelihood of Cooper's survival. What if the area into which he had parachuted that night had been far more hospitable than the mountainous wilderness that had consumed so many man-hours and air reconnaissance resources? Theoretically, it was possible that D.B. Cooper was still alive. Well, actually, I think you need so much less than the money find at Tina Bar to indicate that D.B. Cooper was alive, and I don't necessarily know if that's something that is extremely open for debate or discussion, because where people mostly expect that Cooper jumped would have been rather flat, rather non-threatening, non-intimidating farmland. Because, of course, you have this concept, which they are completely right to talk about in this book, Could Forrest Fenn D.B. Cooper, that Cooper would have jumped into rough, mountainous terrain, full of trees and thicket. It's quite possible that Cooper jumped and landed on relatively even ground. Even if there's some bumps in the turf, I don't necessarily think that that would have killed him. I think that D.B. Cooper survived the jump, and then theoretically it was possible that Cooper was still alive. Sure, but here's another thing that you may have noticed from those paragraphs that I just read. Does this not throw something into the works that is a little bit misleading? That Cooper's money being found at Tina Bar indicates that the search activity has been off. Now, you guys who have followed Cooper Friday here on Black Box Online Radio will know that I am someone who believes that the money was manually placed there. I was about to say planted, but Eric Eulis doesn't like that term, and maybe planted is not the word. Planted almost seems like someone would have done this for some type of ceremonial reason or something like that. And I don't think it was. I mean, I don't know why the money was there. Let's just put it that way. But I think it's extremely confusing. But at first, I thought the money arrived there by some type of natural means that people weren't accounting for. But then over time, I actually started to think that the money was planted. I did it again. Placed there much later, maybe 1978, maybe 1979. Why? I do not know. I don't think there was any real benefit. I told you guys about that wacky idea that I had come to mind once about maybe Cooper did it because he thought the money was going to make his life better, and it made it worse, so he just threw away the last $6,000. But that would be a ceremonial gesture. And, I mean, I don't necessarily know why the money's at Tina Bar, but you know what? Neither does anyone else. It is an absolute wrench that is thrown into the theory. But if she's going to be insinuating that this is because of the drop zone, I'm not necessarily sure that that's appropriate. If she's going to be insinuating that this has some type of relevance connected to the searches in 1971, I'm not sure that that's relevant. I told you guys very clearly 3.5 seconds ago that I believe that the money was planted there at some place there at some time between 1978, 79, or 1980, probably 78 or 79. And that's the best explanation that I can have by looking at the facts, by looking at the bands that are around it, by the fact that I don't think that it was moved there because of the dredge in 1974, which most likely would have blown the bills all over the place. Definitely wouldn't have been able to have any type of bank band hold it together, anything like that. I just simply don't think that that's what happened. I think that the money was placed there by human hands. For what reason, I do not know. So, I mean, who did it? Was it Cooper? I can't really think of anyone else, because I think any other person would have just kept the money, unless they were extremely afraid of being caught or they didn't want to be some type of accomplice. All right, well, this is another thing that people bring to my attention all the time about the Tina Bar money find, when they say that, if somebody just wanted to get rid of this, they wouldn't have to bury it at a sandbar next to the Columbia River. They could have wrapped it in a bag and thrown it in the trash. They could have left it on a park bench. They could have tossed it anywhere. You wouldn't have to go through that effort. So to me, this appears that somebody actually did this for a specific reason. I've been trying to avoid words like planted and ceremonial, but those are the ones that I can't shake them. I mean, if I had to make a determination right now, I would think that somebody planted it at Tina Bar for a ceremonial reason, or it could be something completely different. I mean, maybe somebody had the money and they were transporting it and they lost $6,000 in 1978, 79. There could be other reasons, but I don't have anything better than that. If you want to weigh in on your Tina Bar money theory, please put it in the comments section down below. You heard my giant rambling mess there. But as you can see from this book, Could Forrest Fenn D.B. Cooper, they really do talk about some of the facts of the case, but they also alternate between these personal stories, and they have every right to do that in their book if this is going to be talking about personal connections, memoir, bonding with the father, and I actually think that those things are very nice to read. One more time, the name of the book is Could Forrest Fenn D.B. Cooper by Mindy Fauci and Stephanie Thirtyacre. Now we're going to get to the Q&A session where I'm going to respond to some questions and comments from you guys about Forrest Fenn, his treasure hunt, and the possibility of him being D.B. Cooper. Because as you can see from the story of Forrest Fenn, he is equally involved in this treasure hunt case, and I don't think that we can separate these things. The most famous thing that he ever did was create this treasure hunt, placing a bronze chest with $2 million in gold and valuables somewhere in the Rocky Mountains. And before I read off any kind of questions or comments, I would like to read the Forrest Fenn poem one more time. And it's my understanding that to find his treasure, you had to have a combination of the poem as well as things that were in his book. And I was watching an interview with him where he stated very clearly that there were clues in his book. The interviewer said, "Now, is it true that there are clues throughout your book about the location of the treasure?" And he says, "No, I don't think that's true. I said that there were clues in my book. There's a difference." But the Forrest Fenn poem is as follows. As I have gone alone in there, and with my treasures bold, I can keep my secret where, and hint of riches new and old. Begin it where warm waters halt, and take it in the canyon down, not too far but too far to walk, put it in below the home of Brown. From there it's no place for the meek, the end is drawing ever nigh, there'll be no paddle up your creek, just heavy loads and water high. If you have been wise and found the blaze, look quickly down, your quest to cease. But tarry scant with marvel gaze, just take the chest and go in peace. So why is it that I must go and leave my trove for all to seek? The answer I already know. I've done it tired, and now I'm weak. So hear me all and listen good, your effort will be worth the cold. If you are brave and in the wood, I give you title to the gold. And that was from Forrest Fenn's treasure poem that was found in 2020 by an individual named Jack Stoof, who becomes a suspicious character all himself. But I wanted to talk to somebody about this because I said the reason that motivated me for making episodes about Forrest Fenn here on Black Box Online Radio was because I had the opportunity to interview John Limbach, who's the author of the book Where Was Skip, and his D.B. Cooper suspect is named Lauren Skip Hall, and I had a very simple question for him, and that was, so, may I ask, you followed Forrest Fenn's treasure hunt. Do you think that the hunt was real, or was it staged? Because it just seemed very odd about how there wasn't more documentation about the location of his treasure when it was found. There wasn't more of an explanation about how the treasure was found, and the person, Jack Stoof, who found it said that he didn't want to reveal the exact location and how he did it because he didn't want people to flock to the area and destroy the land, which, let's not kid ourselves. Some people genuinely do believe that. Some people genuinely have that type of mindset, and they're actually trying to be, well, they're trying to be peaceful, and they're foreseeing human destruction of the ecosystems. But John Limbach responded to me by saying, the hunt was real. The ending was a fabrication. And I said, thanks for that. You mean that Forrest Fenn actually hid the treasure and he helped the guy find it? And John Limbach responded by saying, yes. He hid the treasure. The chest was found in September of 2019, yet it wasn't announced until June of 2020. In that time, another searcher named Michael Wayne Sexton died while out looking for the chest. The creator and finder were entwined in a cover-up to never let the public know that the chest was actually found and could have been announced before another searcher died. Both the creator and the finder were adamant that no hint or nudge was given to find the chest. Of course, with all of the mystery of what happened, there are those who do not believe their claims. And I was like, well, that actually really is a shame, because the 48 hours piece that was done on Forrest Fenn was mostly calling him out for this, that he could have put an end to the treasure hunt because multiple people had died during it. At the time they made the 48 hours piece, 5 people had passed away looking for Forrest Fenn's treasure, and last week I said that I thought that they were very insensitive, but I think that the fairest way of putting that is, we have things like extreme sports competitions, we have things like the Olympics, and people have died during extreme sports competitions, and people have died during the Olympics. And I don't believe that the appropriate answer is to cancel extreme sports and to cancel the Olympics. It's to make them safer. And Forrest Fenn openly said that you shouldn't be looking for the treasure in a place where an old man couldn't get access to it. So, saying that there should be safety precautions put in place. And when he said this stuff, it did come across as very insensitive. But I don't believe that he would be ultimately liable. However, this is a very big game changer. If they already had the treasure, and then people are still searching for it, and somebody dies while not looking for anything, that's like an athlete dying during the race, and the race has been over. You could have just told him to stop and go home, but he's going to keep trying, and then that is something that is a little bit of negligence. Now, I don't necessarily know if he would win anything in a court of law, or the family of the deceased would win in a court of law, but I'm going to look at the final question that I had for John Limbach about the Forrest Fenn treasure hunt. Why did Fenn wait until 2020 if the treasure had been discovered in 2019? And the answer is, the finder toyed with Fenn to ensure that no legal action could befall upon him for tax purposes. The finder wanted Fenn to gift him the chest for tax purposes. He moved to Puerto Rico in October of 2019 to have more favorable tax status. Ultimately, this was unnecessary, as Fenn did gift him the treasure. And I do appreciate those comments from John Limbach. Really I do, because this is something that I think is very eye-opening and is getting to the heart of the issue. And last week on the channel, I was talking to you guys about a YouTuber named Adventure Explore Discover, who put out his own video about how he thought that the Forrest Fenn treasure hunt was staged, and he's giving all of these reasons that made a fair amount of sense, actually. But then ultimately, he was talking about how he thought that the thing was staged because he had provided the best solve. This YouTuber had provided the best solved and the most accurate solution to the riddles and the poem and the puzzle, and he didn't find the treasure and this other guy did, and he's like, well, clearly mine was right and this other guy found it, therefore the whole thing was staged. That would be like somebody saying that, oh yeah, I know who D.B. Cooper is, and then it turns out that the FBI announces, yeah, the D.B. Cooper case has been solved, and this guy was D.B. Cooper, and then that sleuth or investigator still comes forward and says, nope, I know who the real D.B. Cooper is, the FBI is lying to you. Well, why do you think the FBI is lying to us? Because I know who the real D.B. Cooper is, because my answers are right and theirs are wrong. I wouldn't accept that for a second. I wouldn't be persuaded about that at all. All right, I'd be curious. I would want to know what that person had to say and why they thought that the FBI was wrong. But solely based on the fact that, oh, I'm right and they're wrong, my answers are the best and theirs are not very acceptable. But over the last 7 days, I put a lot more thought into the Forrest Fenn treasure, and I really began to notice that there really wasn't that much documentation. In 2019 and 2020, I would have been filming this just non-stop, like all the time, driving it from Wyoming to Santa Fe, which is reportedly the way the finder did. And even if he's going to wait and upload it in 2020 or something like that, I would have included everything in a step-by-step process because I wouldn't be able to stay away from the social media aspects. But ultimately, it appears that that's not what happened. And I mean, we have a comment here though that came in on last week's episode that I'll read for you guys, and this is from Why Must Go, and it says, "No, neither Forrest Fenn or Skippy was D.B. Cooper." And perhaps you're referring to Skip Hall, the suspect of the previously mentioned John Limbach. If I can be very honest with you guys, I think that Forrest Fenn is a far out suspect. He's not the worst suspect that I've ever heard, but he's far out. And let's say this treasure is real. The fact that he didn't include anything about D.B. Cooper in the treasure chest, that shocks me. Now, he hid this thing years ago. He didn't know how long he was going to live. I mean, if he left money from the D.B. Cooper heist, even a $20 bill and the sunglasses, then he would go to jail. Because they're saying this stuff in the book, could Forrest Fenn be D.B. Cooper? Well, can they still send D.B. Cooper to jail? Is D.B. Cooper still alive? They did a John Doe indictment against D.B. Cooper so that he could be arrested at any time, even beyond the statute of limitations. So yes, he could have been arrested. Let's say if he hid the treasure in 2010. Somebody found it in 2011, and it has a $20 bill and the sunglasses and a confession to being D.B. Cooper, he would go to jail. So I think that the temptation would be there to hide something in the treasure chest that was relevant to the Cooper heist, but that is something that someone would reserve for a deathbed confession, not for something that could send them to jail for 10 or 11 years. Now, Skip Hall is a very defendable suspect in my book, and I think that Skip Hall is one of my top suspects up there with Ted Braden. Forrest Fenn, though, he's one that's so easy to dismiss because this just appears to be some type of outrageous connection to another story. Forrest Fenn does have the aviation background, Vietnam veteran, pilot, knew a lot about airplanes, which I think Cooper did. He's the right age. Not really the right description. I really don't think he looks much like the way they describe Cooper, but that's just me. But what do you think, Forrest Fenn or Skip Hall? I would love to read your comments. Please put them in the section down below. And the next one comes to us, and this is from Jay Weiss, who's going to be talking about D.B. Cooper's parachute and the briefcase bomb. Most agree that he did not take the briefcase and he did not take the parachute and the briefcase bomb with him after the jump. So, why haven't they found those two items at the very least? Maybe Eric Eulis has a good point, and the search area was wrong at the time. Well, Stephanie 30acre and Mindy Fauci can join you because they seem to think that the search area was wrong too, according to the conventional purposes. It's really strange that they found nothing, even a loose $20 note in the original 1971 search. Can I share something with you guys? And this is not something that I have evidence to support. But if I were just to kind of get lost in a daydream and imagine how Cooper would have committed the skyjacking, I think Cooper took the briefcase bomb with him. I think that was also tied to his rig in some way, somehow, for the simple fact that it has not been found, for the simple fact that I don't necessarily think that he would have thrown it away out of fear of leaving evidence behind. I think that especially if the bomb were a dud, I think that he would have taken the briefcase bomb with him. Now, did he keep the briefcase after he landed on the ground? That I have no knowledge of, but I mean, I think that I'm in the minority because most people believe that he would have just thrown the briefcase out of the plane. I think that he tied it to his rig. That's just me, though. That's what I would do as well. And I know I'm just kind of projecting my own mindset onto D.B. Cooper, but sometimes it's just, what would a person do in those particular situations? Next challenge question for you. Do you think that D.B. Cooper held on to the briefcase bomb? And the next comment comes to us from Kid Freshy, who says, Forrest Fenn was a con artist who concocted his bogus hunt to secretly pass his fortune to his heirs to avoid taxes. But he wasn't Cooper. Now, I told you guys that I had somewhat of a reversal about this thing about hoaxing the treasure hunt. I think that John Limbach's statement was fairly plausible. Of course, I wasn't there and I don't necessarily know what happened, but this guy's saying that he found the treasure and he went to Forrest Fenn. He was saying that he wanted to arrange this so he could get the full value of it without paying taxes. He moved to Puerto Rico essentially for no reason because Forrest Fenn gave him the treasure. and that there was a problem with it where somebody actually died looking for the treasure that wasn't there. So it seems like that it was a hoax for a little bit, or the final stages of it were a hoax. And I think that John Limbach may have accurately characterized that when he said the hunt was real, the find was staged, or I guess the word might be contaminated, polluted, distorted, and we didn't get the true story of the find. But I mean, there's something that I definitely thought about. I absolutely do not accept it for the reason of, well, this guy clearly didn't have the right solution because a different YouTuber had figured it out and his solution was better. But anyway, we're going to move on to Granite Granny, who says, no, Forrest Fenn could not have been D.B. Cooper. Richard McCoy Jr. was D.B. Cooper. And McCoy is a suspect that I really don't like to talk about anymore. I absolutely do not think that Richard McCoy was D.B. Cooper. And I think Ryan Burns said something to the effect of once, and I'm paraphrasing, that on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is Cooper, McCoy is a -4. And yes, I'm paraphrasing, but that's where I put McCoy. Absolutely not. But what I think is so much more interesting about McCoy is his military background. Richard McCoy was an ex-Green Beret, yet when he is on the plane during his skyjacking in 1972, he's a nervous wreck. What does that say about the cool, calm, and collected Cooper? That sounds like Cooper has nerves of steel, and I don't think that it was only the bourbon talking. I think that this shows that Cooper did have experience. He was familiar with being up in the sky, but also he was somebody who really wanted to show that he could stay cool and calm under pressure. Perhaps different personality traits. Maybe D.B. Cooper was Ted Braden and he was the toughest skydiver to ever live. That could be the answer to everything. Or it could be something different altogether, but I absolutely do not think that Cooper was McCoy. I think that McCoy is not only too young, but the flight attendants didn't identify him. Moreover, I think that Cooper and McCoy had different personalities, and I think that McCoy was a Cooper copycat. I think that McCoy was trying to be like Cooper, but it just didn't work out. And then we have Marie Anik, who says, oh, this is an interesting idea. He was just on the right side of narcissistic, charming, and clever enough. And it actually says batshit clever enough, but the batshit are written with emojis. One bat emoji and one shit emoji. He was narcissistic, charming, and clever, batshit enough. I doubt it, frankly, though. The hairline and the age is right, but his face and nose weren't thin enough, nor was he particularly racially ambiguous, but we've heard of dafter suspects. I completely agree with his physical appearance. D.B. Cooper was described as olive skin. Maybe he could have been mistaken for a Latino. Somebody like Skip Hall could have pulled that off. Even somebody like Ted Braden had darker features. McCoy, not necessarily so much, but maybe he could have altered his skin with makeup the way he did in 72. And no, I don't think McCoy was Cooper. I just said he's a -4 suspect. But with Forrest Fenn, I absolutely do not see a single olive-skinned aspect to his complexion. I don't see a single Latino-like aspect to his racial makeup, or Native American, or Southern Italian, or anything that is racially ambiguous, as it's put. So that's another strike against Forrest Fenn as a D.B. Cooper suspect. And I would like to move on to the next one, because there was a rather lengthy comment that came in about the treasure hunt, and this is from Solver of Fenn's Treasure. And this person did not provide a legal name, and even if they did, I wouldn't read that off out of fairness, but it says, Forrest Fenn spent 15 years creating what he called the Marvel Gaze. And it actually says what he and I called the Marvel Gaze. You read that in the poem. Forrest used 2 DC characters. 2 people can keep his secret if one of them is dead. On his secret dedication grave marker with the names Kent and Esther, to honor the lost and forgotten soldiers that he found in that special place he found in My War for Me storyline. Clark Kent and Aunt Esther were the heroes of the homely girl that were guarding the $3 million treasure chest that was buried a few feet below the grave marker. One of Forrest's biggest verbal clues was, Most people underestimate the importance of the first clue, and if you don't have that one nailed down, you might as well stay home and play canasta. Forrest's first clue in The Thrill of the Chase, Treasure Hunt, which is a 9-clue poem, led me precisely to the importance of the first clue. And this is going to go on for a while, talking about how the treasure was found, and there are actually 7 secret techniques, and then there are 2 people in places, Clark Kent and Aunt Esther, and I really do appreciate this, though, from Finder of Forrest Fenn's Treasure for laying everything out there. And if you want to hear some other things about genuine skepticism in the case, there is a video that is on the channel Forrest Find. One more time, Forrest Find, not Forrest Fenn, but Forrest Find. It's called The Hidden Layer in the Forrest Fenn Treasure Solve, and this person provides explanations on how the treasure could have been located, and also about some suspicious things in the story. Maybe you heard a particular word in the poem, and that was blaze. You're supposed to look for something called the blaze, and when Jack Stoof located the treasure, he said that the blaze was on a tree, but the tree was no longer there and it had been destroyed. Well, it's like, if it had been destroyed, how did you even know it was there in the first place? And this person was not using any sort of I'm better than you mentality. The person who made this Forrest Find video was actually looking at some genuine skeptical alternatives about how the blaze could have been a specific boulder, and that was a marker and a way to find the treasure, but he provided lots of explanations on how Forrest Fenn's treasure could have been located. But I'd like to say thank you to everyone who left comments on last week's episode, and overall, in conclusion, it seems like, number 1, Forrest Fenn was not D.B. Cooper. Number 2, I think this is a fascinating book. Could Forrest Fenn be D.B. Cooper? And it's also actually kind of nice to just hear some stories about people who are investigating the Cooper case, as opposed to the ones which are like, oh, well, I knew a D.B. Cooper suspect, and this is what their personality was like, therefore they were D.B. Cooper. Not really like that at all. It's just, I was investigating D.B. Cooper with my dad, and this is how we did it. I actually found that to be really interesting. But ultimately, Forrest Fenn may not have been D.B. Cooper. He's a rather low-ranking suspect for a reason, and I would love to know your responses to my challenge questions. Do you think that D.B. Cooper was a pilot, and do you think he took the briefcase bomb with him? I'm going to be in the minority, but I also do not believe that it was configured in a way that would work. It might have been real dynamite, but I think that Cooper could have easily configured it or not configured it in a way in which it would actually explode. Just my take on the subject. Let me know what you think, and please drop your ideas in the comments section down below. And to conclude, we have the Cooper Profile segment, and this one's going to be very, very brief this week. In the Cooper Profile, I talked to you guys about the psychological profiling of skyjacking, and I've started with the book The Skyjacker by Dr. David G. Hubbard, who really wrote this as a way to provide a groundbreaking look into the world of skyjacking, because at the time, skyjacking had not been studied from a psychological perspective. These were crimes that started in the mid-20th century. And the story for this week does not involve a patient, like almost every other segment here on the Cooper Profile. Instead, Dr. David G. Hubbard interviewed a patient, and then he picked up a copy of Life magazine, and he found an advertisement for Eastern Airlines that says something to the effect of, "Even though you were born on the earth, you can be at home in the sky." And he was just shocked, and there's actually some text on this Eastern Airlines advertisement that is almost as big as the Forrest Fenn treasure poem. And, he went back to his hotel room, he thought about it, he was ruminating on it, and he actually interviewed a skyjacker named Rafe, whom I was discussing last week on the Cooper Profile, and was like, "Yeah, this article is in Life magazine, this advertisement was in Life magazine. Have you read this?" And he said, "Yes, I've seen that before." And he began to think that, is there any way that the actions and activities of the airlines were exacerbating and almost provoking the actions and activities of skyjackers? And indirectly, it appears yes. Dr. David G. Hubbard, as a psychiatrist, also noticed that after discussing Rafe's incident at a conference where he's giving a presentation and talking about how this particular skyjacker had problems with a vestibular issue related to his balance, When he was taken from Cuba to Canada by boat, it took him 7 days to recover his equilibrium and his sense of balance, and he began to notice that after the conference and after the presentation, several of the scientists who attended it also had problems with dizziness and vertigo and problems with their own equilibrium. So these are the things that a psychiatrist will notice, that when certain ideas are put out to large amounts of people, they influence and affect them. Absolutely no fault of Eastern Airlines. They didn't say, oh yeah, skyjack an airplane and you'll feel good. Absolutely not. They said you'll feel at home in the sky. And when I first started this Cooper Profile segment, I thought that was the most ridiculous stuff in the world. Skyjackers are committing these crimes because they want to be above the earth, because they did not feel any love or happiness on the earth. Now, we're starting to see real patterns that point in that direction. As I said, short segment for the Cooper Profile, but I really do appreciate the ideas of Dr. David G. Hubbard. Thank you so much for listening to this week's Cooper Friday, and feel free to check out some of the links in the description box. And I also want to remind you guys that the images that you see from this program are archived at True Crime Designs on Facebook, True Crime Designs. You can download this program for free on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcasts, under the names Black Box True Crime or Black Box Podcast. And this show comes to you Monday through Friday, talking about the Zodiac Killer, Jack the Ripper, and D.B. Cooper here on Fridays, the Black Dahlia, and I'll be launching the new segment about Madeleine McCann. And if you want to support all of these efforts, you can go over to buymeacoffee.com, buymeacoffee.com/blackboxned88, and that allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show. And anybody who makes a donation will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. That's all for me now. Everybody have a good weekend, and until next time.